Hey everyone, thanks very much for coming along. Today I'm looking at Abbey Orchestra Symphonic Strings from Spitfire Audio, the brand new library that they've just released. I've written a really short piece as a way of kind of exploring what this library can do. I'm going to play it to you in a couple of seconds. But first off, I've noticed that there are 1,234 subscribers out there. Thank you so much for subscribing. If any of the rest of you fancy subscribing, now would be the perfect time to do so. So this piece I'm going to play you is a really short work which explores what Abbey Orchestra can do. So I'm sharing the melody around all the different sections. It even finishes with the basses taking on the tune as well, just to really hear what that kind of sounds like. I'm using the full range of the strings. They're playing right at the very bottom of the range and then kind of soaring very high as well. I just really want to see what Abbey Orchestra Symphonic Strings can do. So here's this piece. It's called The Embrace of the Stars, and I'll do a score breakdown afterwards. So not the perfectly programmed piece. There's a few lumps and bumps here and there as I'm kind of just getting to know this library, but I'm really happy with how it's sounding. First thing to say is that on all the strings, I'm using mix 2 mic positions. It's the kind of the drier version, less wide, and because I'm having to blend this in with other libraries, which I'll show you in a second, I'm using this kind of drier library just to do that. I have been experimenting with the different mic positions that there are here. Mix 2 sounds fantastic. Mix 1 also sounds great as well, but just because I want to blend, Mix 2 is what I'm using here. So I'll just tell you what other instruments I'm using here. So the woodwinds are all my old trusty Spitfire BBC Symphony Orchestra Pro. So that's all the winds. I think it's a really usable, great library. The brass are all Air & Venture Infinite Brass, a library that I really enjoy using and get a lot of control. Here's just a little bit of them on their own. So they are a tremendous brass library. I really enjoy using them. I get so much control, and they, when you program them right, I think they sound pretty realistic. Okay, percussion, we're using a combination of Spitfire BBC SO Pro, Abbey Road Orchestra, bass drum, the first Abbey Road Orchestra library that I bought. Some East-West cymbals here, it's from Hollywood Orchestra, I think. The harp is from Spitfire and BBC SO. And then, of course, we come to the strings, which are going to be the kind of the focus of this video, I suppose. Okay, let's just listen to some of the strings kind of in isolation. And before I do that, I'm going to show you what I've kind of got on my string bus. So a little tiny bit of EQ, taking out a little bit of harshness, adding a tiny bit of a kind of shelf, that's probably a bit much, and taking out a little bit of mids. I'm not even sure if I need that. Anyway, and rolling off a bit of the kind of low rumble. I may change this. I've only had the library a couple of days. As I kind of get used to the library, I'm sure I'll make changes to this, but this is what's on the string bus. I'm using a little bit of Oxford inflator just to kind of fatten it all up a little bit. And then Gullfoss, which just kind of makes everything sound a bit better. And then on each instrument as well, we've of course just doing EQ for just now, so rolling off the bass, taking out a bit of mids, adding a bit of shelf, that kind of thing all the way down. And the reverbs that I'm using, so I'm using Climactic Rooms Pro for the early reflections and Altiverb for the late reflections. So let's just hear what the strings kind of sound like on their own. This is just from the first kind of exposition of the melody. Let's try and get the strings on their own here, just so you can kind of hear what this sounds like with a tiny little bit of processing. So I think it sounds absolutely beautiful. What I'm doing quite a lot of here, particularly in the violin ones and twos, is using key switching to go between different articulations within one phrase. So I'm doing it in the opening here. If you just watch what's going on here, you'll see that I'm going between the lyrical legato and the legato portamento. This is what this sounds like on its own. So if I didn't have those key switch changes, it would sound like this. And then again with the key switch in. So having that portamento at certain points adds that sense of realism to the notes, because if you did give this to a string orchestra, they would absolutely add portamentos at certain moments, and in this style of music they would just kind of do it automatically, probably without having to be told. But of course, the computers, we have to tell them where to actually do these kind of things. And I think it just adds a sense of realism, and it's quite easy to do with key switches. So yeah, just adding in the occasional kind of portamento just to add to that sense of kind of realism. I also do it a little bit later on in the lower echelons. So in this phrase here, when I scored this out, which I did on Sibelius, the instruction that I put was Sol G, which means that all the violins have to play every note on the G string, even if it's not the easiest position for them to play it in. It means that you're kind of using the timbre of the G string, which is a really important, beautiful one to use in the violin. And this means that they have to do more portamento, more glissando, because they can only play on one string. So it sounds like this. So the only way that they can play that note going up to this E flat is by glissandoing up to it on the G string. Again, this is just kind of adding that sense of realism in my kind of programming of making this sound as realistic as possible, and just kind of really thinking what would what would a player do and what would a string orchestra do, and trying to emulate that in the software. And I really enjoy kind of getting geeky about that and kind of sorting that out. So yeah, I'm doing quite a bit of that in this. Another combination that I'm really enjoying in this library is the violas and the celli working together. So here's a passage where they play a melody together, and then they go into chords. So that is a beautifully rich sonorous sound. Even just the cellos on their own, I think it's worth kind of hearing. A lot of bad parallel writing there for me, but oh well. So yeah, I'm really impressed by the kind of sonorous sound of the celli, and particularly the violas in combination with that as well. The basses, of course, have a great sound. We actually have them at the very end, playing with the violas and the celli. So this is where the basses take over the melody on their own. So I think I'm particularly impressed by the sort of just the depth and the weight of this library. It's coming across extremely well, and it's got that truly kind of deep orchestral symphonic string sound, which perhaps the likes of Cinematic Studio Strings don't have. And this is kind of where this library will fill that gap in my armory, as it were. So let's take a listen to the kind of the loud, long legatos that the strings play at this point here, just kind of at the climax. This is just violin 1 in isolation. It's actually plays some scales before it. So this is actually playing the legato run patch before going into the legato. So this is it from here. So you can really hear the dynamic range that's on the go there. I think actually I'm going to make a change just now. I think it's a bit heavy the whole way through, so I'm just actually going to take the volume down a tad, just so we have that sense of actual kind of contrast, that it has somewhere to go. So that it saves kind of the loudest volume for a little bit later on, so just the end of the phrase. This might make it sound a wee bit better. So now it should crescendo a bit more. Yeah, very, very subtle change, but I think kind of worth it. What I really like about this sound is how you can really hear the kind of the intensity of the bow. You can hear that sort of distorted sound when it sounds like the bow's being retaken. That's really very realistic. And I think the actual tone is pretty good. It doesn't sound too kind of synthy up in this range. It sounds very realistic. So yeah, overall very, very impressed with that sound there, which is wonderful. Okay, let's just hear the whole string section here at this this kind of climactic moment. I'll just get all the MIDI open. So yeah, I think that's a tremendously powerful sound. Again, as I said, the kind of the rustic, rough, raw sound that you want there has been captured and emulated really well. The cellos in this range are really beautiful. Let's just open that up. Just in this kind of this high soaring, searing sort of range. The intensity of that tone is absolutely tremendous. Again, being able to hear the bow changes and the raw, rough energy that gives is extremely realistic. I think Spitfire have really captured that fantastically well. So I'm very, very impressed by that. That was the lyrical legato extended. For sake of argument or discussion, I'm going to change it to the performance legato just so you can compare what it sounds like. I think I'm hearing a lot more of the front end of the note, a lot more of the attack if I just go back and just compare a little bit. Yeah, this one, the lyrical definitely sounds a lot smoother and more connected. Maybe it's just the way I programmed it and the velocities are very high. But in fact, let's just put the, change that and we'll put the velocities down a bit just to see if this does anything. So that really made a big difference with the velocities lower. I think I'm actually going to go through and change all the velocities because they're all a little bit hot at this point. Just see if that makes a difference. Just turn them down a touch. So I think that actually kind of softens. Okay, I've done that in violins already. Kind of softens the front end of the notes in a much more pleasing way. Let me know in the comments which ones you prefer, whether you prefer the lyrical or the performance. I think I prefer lyrical. I think I'm going to stick with it. It feels a bit smoother, like the notes are a bit more kind of glued together, which is quite nice. Yeah, I'll probably do a video later on just kind of experimenting between the two. So what I really like to do is double the cello and the horns, and these infinite brass horns blend pretty well with this cello sound, I'd say. So I think I could write a whole piece of just those horns and just those cello. I think that would be a really fantastic sound. So I think they blend pretty well together. Okay, so final thoughts on this library, having had it for a few days. I absolutely love it. I think it's an incredibly produced library. The legatos are amazing. The depth of sound in the violas and cellos and basses are extraordinary. And I'm really liking how it's kind of matching with my other libraries as well. Few things, of course, to consider. It took over 400 gigabytes of download, so I had to, do a lot of rejigging to get this onto a fast hard disk, external hard disk. But that's just part of the consideration of buying a library of this size. It can be quite RAM intensive, particularly if you're going to go down the mic position routes. I have experimented with them a little bit, just to kind of see what happens. And very quickly, I was using sort of 60, 70 gigabytes of RAM, which is absolutely fine, and something which I would consider if I was going to publish this piece or something, and I really wanted to kind of mix it properly. I would maybe go down that sort of route. But for now, Mix 2 and Mix 1 are absolutely fantastic. And as you can see, only using 13.9 gigabytes of RAM, which is totally manageable with the rest of the instruments. So that's something to consider if you are going to think about buying this library. You're going to need a very big, very fast hard disk, and you're going to make sure that your machine can handle it, because it's potentially going to use up a lot of RAM if you want to really kind of capitalize on the different mic positions. I just can't wait to get on and write some music with it, get to know it a bit better. If you've got any comments or questions, I'd be happy to get back to you. Please do drop us a like and give us a wee subscribe if you enjoy this video. Otherwise, more of these videos coming up, particularly looking at Abbey Road Orchestra in the next couple, as I kind of get to know this library a bit better. But otherwise, thanks so much for coming along. See you next time.